Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Corporal Maya Rodriguez sat at the far end, spine straight, hands folded on her lap, her Barrett M82 case propped against the wall like an unwelcome guest. Around her, the room buzzed with casual confidence, SEALs leaning back in their chairs, laughing, passing energy bars back and forth, the smell of coffee and gun oil thick in the air. Maps rustled. Radios clicked. And every time she opened her mouth, someone talked over her. She could still hear the words from earlier that morning, Staff Sergeant Martinez's dismissive voice cutting through her like a cold wind. Rodriguez, your rear support. Stick to the radio. We'll handle the kinetics. Rear support. Like she was an afterthought, a footnote in someone else's operation. Her dark eyes traveled across the map pinned to the wall, the valley where Viper 7 would be inserted, the high ridges encircling it like teeth, the narrow extraction route. She had already spotted the flaw. The eastern ridge. Steep, brutal, almost vertical, but it offered a commanding view of the entire operational area. She had suggested it quietly, pointing out the kill zones, the likely ambush points. The room had erupted in laughter. That climb will finish you before the enemy even notices, one of the SEALs had chuckled. You'd be frozen halfway up before you ever set that rifle down. Maya had said nothing. She just nodded, her face unreadable, and tucked the suggestion back into the mental notebook where she kept all the times she'd been underestimated. Now, hours later, she sat in the Tactical Operations Center listening to the radio. The mission had gone sideways faster than anyone expected. The valley was a cauldron of death. Granite cliffs, ancient and jagged, echoed with the staccato of automatic weapons fire. The air itself seemed to shake with the rattle of PKM machine guns. Viper 7, Sitrep, the TOC officer barked into the headset. Static, then Martinez's voice tight-clipped. We are surrounded, taking heavy contact from the north, east, and west. Ammo is low. We've got wounded, requesting immediate evac. Maya's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. She could picture them, the men who had laughed at her, pinned in the crumbling ruins of that valley, faces streaked with sweat and blood, scanning the high ground for an escape route that didn't exist. Command came back cold and merciless. Negative on air support. Weather has grounded the birds. You're on your own until dawn. Dawn. 8 hours away. Maya's stomach twisted. 8 hours in that kill box was a death sentence. The radio crackled again. Someone whispered, hoarse and hollow, "This is it. No air support coming. We're already ghosts." Her eyes dropped to the rifle case beside her. The Barrett was more than steel and polymer to her. It was an extension of her, a tool she had mastered through years of quiet, lonely work. She could still feel her grandfather's calloused hand guiding her small fingers to a rifle's stock on the slopes of the Colorado Rockies. "One shot, one life, me," he used to say. "Make it count." Her chest ached. If she stayed here, if she obeyed orders, she would sit in this heated room listening to those men die one by one, and she would have to live with the sound of it for the rest of her life. Her mind raced. Could she even make the climb in time? Could she hold position under fire? Could she change the outcome at all, or would she just add one more body to the casualty list? Fear gnawed at her ribs, cold and rational. What if you miss? What if you give away your position? What if you make it worse? And then almost suddenly, the fear turned into something cleaner, sharper, a cold fury that burned steady in her chest. Every laugh, every sweetheart, every dismissive wave of a hand replayed in her mind, stacking like ammunition on a belt. Her grandfather's voice returned, quiet and solid as bedrock. When everyone says it's over, Nieta, that's when your shot matters most. Maya stood slowly, deliberately. No one noticed at first. The operators were too busy shouting into radios, trying to pull a miracle out of the static. She keyed her mic one last time, her voice calm. "Communications maintaining position," she reported. A necessary lie. Then she grabbed her rifle, her pack, the rangefinder she had spent so many lonely nights practicing with, and walked out into the freezing darkness. The night air hit her like a slap, sharp and bitter. The base behind her glowed faintly, a little island of light and noise. Ahead, the eastern ridge loomed black against the stars. This was the climb Martinez had laughed at, the climb they said would finish her. The first section was loose shale, treacherous and shifting under her boots. Every step sent a cascade of rock clattering into the darkness. She froze each time, listening for a shout or the distant pop of enemy rifles, heart hammering in her chest. Nothing. She kept moving. Soon the slope steepened into vertical faces of ice and rock. She found handholds by touch, fingers numbing, the pack dragging her backward, threatening to pitch her into the void. The wind funneled through the pass like a living thing, screaming in her ears, clawing at her gear. She gritted her teeth and climbed. Every foot she gained was a small victory. Every muscle burned. Her knees bled where the rock tore through her pants. Once, a stone broke loose under her hand, nearly pulling her free. She slammed her body flat against the rock, chest heaving, listening to the stone bounce away into nothingness. "What are you doing, Maya?" The thought came unbidden, cruel. They told you this was suicide. Maybe they were right. She closed her eyes and remembered a different climb years ago, her abuelo leading her up a snow-dusted ridge in the Rockies. He had stopped halfway, crouched, and told her, "Don't fight the mountain, me. Listen. It will tell you the way." So she listened. She didn't rush. She didn't fight the rock. She moved like she had in training, small, careful shifts, conserving her strength, always keeping 3 points of contact. The mountain, which should have been her enemy, became her ally. Below her, the battle raged. The radio in her ear spat desperate voices, someone down to their last magazine, someone else calling for a corpsman who would never come. Each transmission was a spur, driving her upward. After what felt like hours, her raw, bleeding hands found the lip of the ridge. She hauled herself over, collapsing on her stomach, chest heaving. The wind tore at her gear, tried to roll her back into the abyss, but she pressed herself flat and crawled forward. And then she saw it. The entire valley spread out below her like a deadly chessboard. Through her rangefinder, every position became clear. The SEALs, cornered in the ruins of an old mining compound. The machine guns raking their cover to pieces. The RPG teams moving into position. The enemy commander standing under an awning, calmly directing the slaughter. From the ground, it was hopeless. From here, it was math. Maya unfolded the bipod of her Barrett. The steel legs bit into the rock with a sound that was almost satisfying. She slid into a prone position, cheek resting against the stock. The cold stone against her body was a strange comfort, solid, steady, unyielding. She chambered around. The sound was soft, metallic, intimate. Down in the valley, Martinez's voice came over the net, grim and final. "All units prepare for final defensive positions. Make every shot count. Viper 7 out." The unofficial order to fight to the last man. Maya's breath fogged in front of her. She let half of it out, just like she'd practiced 1,000 times. The reticle settled on the first machine gunner. Her grandfather's voice came one last time, low and certain. "Make it count." Her finger curled around the trigger. And the mountain waited. What happened when the first shot rang out? The mountain answered her trigger pull with thunder. The Barrett bucked against Maya's shoulder, a living, breathing beast. Its roar echoed through the valley like a god's verdict. Down below, the first machine gunner, the one who had been stitching the SEALs' cover with relentless fire, simply ceased to exist. One moment he was there, a silhouette behind the PKM. The next, there was only red mist and a smoking weapon. For one heartbeat, the entire valley froze. No one fired, no one moved. Then the confusion hit like a wave. Who the hell fired that? Martinez barked over the net, scanning for a friendly position that shouldn't exist. Before anyone could answer, Maya shifted slightly, crawling 2 meters left, just like she'd trained never fire from the same spot twice. The Barrett's bipod bit into the rock again. She found her next target, an RPG team crouched behind a ruined wall, loading a round that would have turned the SEAL's cover into rubble. Crack! The loader dropped. The warhead rolled harmlessly away. Crack! The gunner jerked backward, lifeless before his body hit the ground. The valley came alive again, but this time it was chaos on the enemy's side. Shouts in Pashto echoed off the cliffs. Fighters scrambled, trying to find the invisible threat. They fired wildly into the rocks, the cliffs sparking with stray rounds, but Maya was already gone, sliding back into the shadows, belly low against the stone. She had become what they had called her as a joke, a shadow. Another shift, another sight picture. Through her scope, she saw a sniper's glint from a second-story window. A professional, well-positioned, about to line up a shot on one of the SEALs trying to drag a wounded man behind cover. Maya's breath slowed, her mind calculating wind drift, distance, angle. Crack! The enemy sniper was ripped from the window and disappeared from view. 3 shots, 3 kills. Below, Martinez's binoculars finally found her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a small figure prone on a ledge that should have been impossible to reach. Then he saw the muzzle flash, the wisp of heat rising from the barrel. Rodriguez, he whispered almost to himself. It made no sense. She'd been in the TOC the last time he heard her voice. There was no way she could have climbed that ridge in the dark, carrying that monster of a rifle. And yet, there she was. For a moment, the staff sergeant simply stared. Then her voice cut through the net, impossibly calm, steady as bedrock. "Guardian Overwatch to Viper 7, she said. "I have eyes on all enemy positions. Move northeast toward the primary compound wall. I'll provide cover." Guardian Overwatch. It wasn't just a call sign, it was a statement. The Shadow Walker was gone. Martinez didn't hesitate. All Viper elements move northeast. Go, go, go. The men, moments ago on the edge of surrender, surged forward with new life. And every time an enemy tried to pin them down, crack, the shot came from the ridge, precise and merciless. Maya had slipped fully into the state she had chased for years in training, the stillness, the narrowing of the world until there was nothing but math, wind, and the reticle in her scope. Target machine gunner behind a half wall. Range 820 meters. Wind 9 mph right to left. Correction half mil. Breathe in, breathe out. Crack. The gunner dropped. Shift position. Target, enemy radio operator calling for reinforcements. Crack. His headset flew off as he crumpled. The battle began to turn. Maya was no longer just killing, she was dismantling. Each shot was chosen with care, each trigger pull removing a key piece of the enemy's attack. Machine gunners first, then RPG teams, then squad leaders. She wasn't simply keeping the SEALs alive. She was dismantling the enemy's command structure one shot at a time. Down in the compound, the men began to believe the impossible. "She's clearing us a path," one of them said, voice hushed as if speaking too loudly would break the spell. Another SEAL laughed, a short, shocked sound, as a mortar team on the ridgeline was taken out before they could drop a single round. "She's hunting them," Martinez said quietly, and he wasn't wrong. Because that's what it felt like. Through the scope, Maya's breathing was steady, almost meditative. Her heartbeat was slow, her movements precise. She would fire, crawl to a new position, fire again. The enemy couldn't pin her down. Every time they thought they'd found her muzzle flash, she had already shifted, forcing them to waste precious seconds and ammunition firing at empty rock. And the more she struck, the more their discipline crumbled. She could see it in their movements, the frantic glances, the way they hesitated to expose themselves. Fear was setting in. But she felt no triumph. Each squeeze of the trigger was a weight on her soul. Each body that fell through her scope was a reminder that this was no range day, no training exercise under Colorado stars. These were real lives ending at the press of her finger. And yet she did not stop. Because she could also see the seals moving, alive, taking ground instead of losing it. She could hear their voices on the radio, no longer resigned but driven. And she knew she was the thin line between their survival and annihilation. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time lost all meaning. And then silence. For the first time since she'd reached the ridge, there were no targets in her scope. No movement except the cautious advance of Viper 7. The enemy had pulled back to regroup. Maya rolled to her side, chest heaving, and stared up at the stars. Her fingers were numb, her lips cracked from the cold. She wanted to rest, God, she wanted to rest, but she knew it wasn't over. She reached for her radio, thumbed the transmit. Guardian Overwatch. You're clear to move to the northern wall. Expect counterattack within minutes. Martinez's voice came back. There was a new tone in it now, not dismissal, not condescension, but something close to respect. Copy that, Guardian, he said. It was the first time he had used her call sign. The first time he had truly seen her. Maya closed her eyes for half a second, letting the words settle in her chest. Guardian. Then she rolled back to her rifle, scanning the valley again, waiting for the next wave. And when it came, when the enemy gathered for their final push, she was ready. What happens when the enemy refuses to break? Maya didn't have to wait long to find out. The valley, which had gone eerily still, came alive again, this time with a roar. They were massing. Through her scope she saw them gathering on the far ridges, a swarm of shadows under the moonlight. Fighters shouting to one another, their voices carrying on the wind. Fresh magazines slammed into weapons. RPGs hoisted onto shoulders. This was no probing attack. This was the final push. Her breath fogged in front of her as she shifted her position again, belly flat against the rock, the Barrett's bipod digging into the stone. She checked her ammunition, counted the loaded magazines by touch. Not enough. Not for what was coming. She ignored the cold knot in her stomach. Down in the compound, Martinez's voice was low but urgent. All Viper elements hold positions. Guardian, we're low on ammo. You'll need to make every shot count. Maya didn't answer. She just settled her cheek against the rifle stock and let her world narrow to the reticle. The first wave came fast. Crack. The lead man dropped. Crack. A squad leader fell, his men scattering for cover. But for every fighter she dropped, two more appeared. They were pouring into the valley now, emboldened by sheer numbers, by the promise of crushing the Americans before dawn. Maya shifted again, found a new firing angle, worked the bolt. Crack. Another body fell. But her movements were slower now. Her muscles ached from the climb, from the hours of holding perfect position under punishing cold. Her hands were raw, the skin torn from stone and recoil alike. She gritted her teeth and kept shooting. Down below, the SEALs were fighting like cornered wolves, every rifle barking, every grenade thrown with desperate precision. Martinez was everywhere at once, dragging the wounded, shouting orders, keeping his team from collapsing under the weight of the assault. And all the while, Maya's shots punctuated the fight like drumbeats. Crack, crack, crack. Each one bought them another few seconds of life. But the enemy kept coming. An RPG streaked toward the compound, impacting just feet from one of the barricades. Dirt and stone rained down, shrapnel whistling past helmets. Maya rolled, found the shooter, and sent a round that tore him from the earth. Another RPG team popped up on the western ridge. Crack. Gone. But she could feel the shift in momentum. There were too many. Even her perfect math couldn't account for the sheer volume of fire pouring into the kill box. For the first time that night, doubt clawed at her chest. You can't hold them all back. You're just one rifle. Her breath came faster, threatening to shake her aim. She forced herself to pause, to close her eyes for half a second, to hear her grandfather's voice in her memory. The mountain doesn't ask you to stop the storm, me. It just asks you to stand through it. She opened her eyes and found her next target. Crack! The storm raged on. Minutes bled into each other. Maya's body was a machine now, acquire, breathe, fire, shift, repeat. Her ears rang from the repeated thunder of the Barrett, her shoulder bruised and throbbing from the recoil. The enemy was less coordinated now. Their lines frayed, the losses were mounting, but they were not finished. Through her scope, Maya spotted something that made her blood run cold. The commander. He was standing on the northern ridge, surrounded by a protective detail, shouting orders into a radio. He was rallying them. Her finger hovered over the trigger. This was a shot that could end it, or at least shatter their will to fight. But it was almost impossible. He was partially obscured, moving constantly, his bodyguard never far from his side. The wind was gusting, unpredictable. If you miss, he'll run. You'll lose him. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She tracked him for several long seconds, waiting for the moment, the perfect alignment of movement and wind. And then a shadow moved in the corner of her scope. Her blood went cold. Enemy sniper. He was aiming directly at the compound, at Martinez, who was exposed, shouting orders completely unaware. Maya had to choose. The commander or the sniper. The mission or Martinez. For a single heartbeat, the world held still. Then her finger moved. Crack! The sniper's rifle went spinning into the dust, his body tumbling backward. Martinez lived. But the commander was gone. Maya slammed her fist into the rock, furious at herself, at the mountain, at the impossible choices this night kept demanding. She rolled to a new position, teeth gritted, scanning desperately for another glimpse of the commander. But he had vanished behind the ridge, leaving only his fighters to carry out his orders. And they were coming again. The next wave hit like a hammer. The SEALs were nearly out of ammunition now, some firing in short, careful bursts to conserve their last rounds. Maya was down to 2 magazines. She swallowed hard, focused. Crack! Crack! Each shot had to be perfect now. The enemy reached the outer wall of the compound. The fight was about to go hand to hand. Maya's hands trembled from exhaustion as she worked the bolt. She could see Martinez in the courtyard below, pulling his pistol, preparing for the last stand. And then through her scope she saw it. The commander. Back again. Barking orders, waving his arms, his men rallying to him like iron filings to a magnet. This was it. The shot that would decide everything. Her heart pounded, her breath came slow. The wind was steady for once, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Maya exhaled halfway. Her finger curled around the trigger. And then the ridge under her shook. An enemy mortar had found its range. The explosion tore through the rock just yards behind her, showering her with shrapnel, deafening her. Her shot went wide. She ducked, heart hammering, blood in her mouth. They had found her. The counterattack wasn't just aimed at the SEALs anymore. Now they were coming for her. What do you do when the enemy finally finds you? Maya didn't think. She moved. The ridge behind her still smoked from the mortar blast, jagged rock shards cutting into her arms as she dragged her rifle and pack forward, crawling fast, belly scraping stone. Every instinct screamed at her to stay low, stay silent. The enemy was blind firing, but they were close now, too close. Tracer rounds tore through the night, red thread stitching the darkness where she had been seconds ago. She gritted her teeth, dragging herself over a sharp outcropping, feeling the skin tear on her forearms. Pain was irrelevant. She needed a new position now. Down below, the compound was on the brink. She could hear Martinez's voice over the net, raw, strained. "Guardian, we're black on ammo. This is it." She wanted to answer, but there was no time. Her world had narrowed to survival, to the sound of boots scrambling on the rocks below her, enemy voices barking as they spread out along the ridge. They were coming for her. She found a narrow crevice in the rock, barely wide enough for her to slip into. She shoved the Barrett in first, then wedged herself after it, heart pounding so hard she was sure they'd hear it. Shadows moved above her, enemy fighters, silhouetted against the stars. Maya held her breath. One of them paused, sweeping a flashlight beam across the rocks. It passed within feet of her hiding place. Her finger found the safety on her sidearm, flicked it off. If they saw her, she'd have one chance to shoot before they overwhelmed her. The beam lingered. And then it moved on. The men kept climbing, heading toward her previous firing position. She let out her breath slowly, the sound masked by the wind. Not yet. When their footsteps faded, she slid out of the crevice and belly crawled along the rock, every movement deliberate, controlled. She had to find a new overwatch position, one with a line of sight to the compound, and preferably one the enemy wouldn't expect. Her arms trembled from exertion. Her shoulder ached from the repeated pounding of the Barrett. Her lungs burned in the thin mountain air. She ignored all of it. Finally, she found it, a narrow shelf just a few meters lower, shielded on three sides by jagged stone. She slid into position, set the bipod, checked her scope. Her view of the compound was different now, angled but clear enough. The SEALs were still fighting, barely. She could see one of them reloading behind a wall, fumbling with his last magazine, his hands shaking. Another man dragged a wounded teammate to cover, his face set with grim determination. And beyond them, the enemy commander, standing tall, shouting, his fighters surging forward with renewed confidence. Maya chambered around. This was her second chance. She calmed her breathing, ignoring the distant shouts of the men still searching for her on the ridge above. She tuned out everything but the scope, the wind, the math. Wind steady, range confirmed. She took the slack out of the trigger, and the world narrowed to a circle of glass. Crack! The Barrett thundered, the recoil slamming into her bruised shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the commander's body jerk. Not a kill shot, not yet, but enough to drop him to a knee. His guards scrambled to drag him behind cover. Maya's hands worked automatically, cycling the bolt, reacquiring the target. Crack! The second round punched through the rock they hid behind, tearing one of the bodyguards off his feet. Crack! The third found the commander's thigh, spinning him onto his back. And then the Barrett went silent. Empty magazine. She slammed another in, hands moving on instinct, chambered around. But the commander was gone, dragged out of sight again. Maya swore under her breath and rolled to a new position. Tracer fire ripped past her, closer now. They'd found her general location. Martinez's voice came through the net, urgent. "Guardian, we can't hold much longer." She keyed her mic, voice low but steady. "Hold for 60 seconds. It wasn't a suggestion. She crawled to the far edge of the shelf, angled the Barrett downslope. There, a machine gun team setting up on the ridge directly above the compound. Crack! Gone! Crack! Their assistant gunner folded next. The SEALs, hearing the shots, surged forward, using the brief lull to reposition. Maya's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forcing it clear. She was running out of time, running out of ammunition, and running out of strength. But she wasn't done. She shifted again, searching for the commander. And then she saw him. Farther back now, standing near a vehicle, shouting into a radio. This was the shot. The one that would end it. But it was long, longer than any shot she had taken tonight. The wind was gusting hard, carrying grit across the rock, threatening to throw the round wide. She took a deep breath. One chance. She let half of it out, the reticle settling, the math aligning in her head. Crack! The round hit the vehicle behind him, showering him with sparks. He dove for cover, vanishing again. Maya closed her eyes for a second, fighting the surge of frustration. She wasn't a machine, she wasn't perfect. But she couldn't miss again. Another explosion rocked the ridge, another mortar, closer this time, spraying her with shrapnel. A piece tore through the sleeve of her jacket, grazing her arm. Warm blood trickled down to her glove. She bit back a cry and reloaded. She couldn't stop now. Down below, she could see the seals starting to fall back toward the inner compound. The fight was seconds from becoming hand-to-hand. She needed to finish this, or they were done. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard something new. Rotor blades. Distant at first, then louder. Extraction birds. But they wouldn't land with the valley still hot. She was the only thing standing between those helicopters and a kill zone. Her fingers tightened on the rifle. One more chance. And then there he was. The commander stepped into the open again, waving his men forward, rallying them for one last assault. Maya settled into the scope, ignoring the pain in her arm, the roar of the battle, the exhaustion pulling at her limbs. The world went silent. It was just her, the wind, and the target. Her grandfather's voice echoed one last time in her memory. One shot, one life, me. Make it count. Her finger squeezed. The Barrett roared, and the bullet began its long, final journey. Did she hit him? For one long, unbearable second, nothing happened. The world seemed to hang suspended. Then through the scope, Maya saw it. The enemy commander jerked backward as if yanked by an invisible hand. His radio flew from his grip, clattering against the rocks. He crumpled in slow motion, his arms splaying out, the life gone from his body before it even struck the ground. And then the valley changed. The men who had moments before been charging forward with murderous confidence froze. Every fighter who saw their commander fall seemed to falter at once, their shouts dissolving into panicked cries. The effect rippled outward like a shockwave. Within seconds, the organized assault fractured into chaos. Fighters broke from cover, running for the hills, firing wildly over their shoulders. Some dropped their weapons entirely. Others simply vanished into the night. Maya exhaled slowly, lowering her cheek from the stock of the rifle. Her arms shook with exhaustion, her body buzzing with adrenaline and cold. She had done it. Down below, Martinez watched the retreat through his binoculars, unable to believe what he was seeing. He had fought in dozens of operations, had seen firefights turn on a single grenade, a single airstrike, a single lucky break, but he had never seen anything like this. One woman. One rifle. 31 shots. He keyed his radio, his voice rough. All Viper elements cease fire, hold positions. The gunfire sputtered out, leaving only the lonely whistle of the wind through the broken compound. Maya stayed prone for several seconds longer, scanning for stragglers. There were none. Only then did she roll onto her back, staring up at the stars, her chest heaving. The tension that had coiled around her spine all night finally began to unwind, leaving her feeling lightheaded, almost hollow. She had saved them. But the thought brought no triumphant rush. Only a deep, quiet exhaustion. The first faint light of dawn touched the mountains, turning the jagged peaks to shades of purple and gold. And then she heard it, the distant thump of rotor blades. Extraction was coming. Maya keyed her mic, her voice barely more than a whisper. Guardian overwatch. Ridge clear. Enemy retreating. You're green for evac. Copy that, Guardian, Martinez replied. And this time there was no mistaking the tone in his voice. Gratitude, respect. As the helicopters dropped into the valley, kicking up dust, the SEALs began to move, carrying their wounded, covering each other. Maya stayed where she was, letting the sound of the rotors wash over her. Her hands trembled now that the fight was done, the adrenaline ebbing from her system. She pressed her palms into the rock, grounding herself. When the last of Viper 7 was aboard, Martinez's voice crackled again. Guardian, birds are lifting in 60 seconds. Can you make it down? She looked toward the sheer climb she'd scaled hours ago, felt the ache in every muscle, the sting of the shrapnel wound in her arm. Yes, she said simply, because failure had never been an option. She slung the Barrett across her back and began the descent. It was harder this time, every grip painful, every step a battle against gravity. Her knees wobbled, her arms ached. At one point, she nearly lost her footing, catching herself by pure instinct. But she made it. By the time she reached the valley floor, the extraction birds were spinning up for departure. Martinez was waiting for her. He watched her approach, this small, mud-caked Marine with blood on her sleeve and a rifle nearly as long as she was tall. She walked like someone carrying the weight of the night still on her shoulders. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She just nodded once. Martinez opened his mouth, then closed it again. What words could possibly be enough? Instead, he simply stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the waiting bird. The other SEALs moved out of the way too, their faces unreadable, a mix of awe and something like shame. Hours ago, some of these men had laughed at her. Now they stepped back as though she were something sacred. Maya climbed aboard, the Barrett across her lap, and the helicopter lifted into the pale dawn sky. As the valley fell away beneath them, she looked back one last time at the ridge where she had fought alone. It looked so small from up here, just a strip of rock among many, indistinguishable from a dozen others. But she knew. She knew what had been decided there. And so did the men sitting around her, silent as the bird carried them home. When they landed back at Firebase Alpha, word had already spread. Maya stepped off the helicopter into a crowd that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Marines, operators, staff, all of them waiting. The air was heavy with something unspoken. Then they parted, making a path straight to the center of the landing pad. And from the far side of the circle, Colonel Harrison emerged. Maya had seen the base commander before, always brisk, efficient, a man with no time for ceremony. But now he walked toward her with deliberate slowness, his eyes locked on her. He stopped just a few feet away. The base fell completely silent. And then, to Maya's shock, the colonel raised his hand to his brow and delivered a perfect, formal salute. The kind reserved for Medal of Honor ceremonies. Maya stood a little taller, despite the ache in her spine, and returned it. In that moment, no words were needed. When they lowered their hands, the colonel spoke, his voice carrying across the tarmac. Corporal, what you accomplished last night will be studied for decades. 31 confirmed kills under impossible conditions. 0 friendly casualties. You didn't just hold the line, you redefined it. He looked around at the gathered men and women. From this moment forward, no one will call this Marine Shadow Walker. Her name is Corporal Maya Rodriguez. Her call sign is Guardian. For the first time that morning, Maya allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Not because of the applause that followed, or the nods of respect from men who had once dismissed her, but because she knew she had earned every inch of that title. Not with their permission, but with her own 2 hands. How do you breathe after a night like that? Maya found herself sitting alone in the barracks shower room long after the others had left, the water long since gone cold. Her hands were still trembling, Not from fear now, but from release, the way a bowstring trembles when it's finally let go. 31 shots. 31 men who would never walk this earth again. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against her knees, and let the water run down her back, washing away the dust, the blood, but not the memory. Because the memory wasn't leaving. She could still see each one through her scope. Each fall, each motionless body. Her abuelo's voice came back to her, steady and warm like it always had. One shot, one life, me. Make it count. She had made them count. All of them. But she couldn't escape the truth. Those lives were now on her. When the water finally turned off on its own, the base's automatic timer, Maya dried her hands mechanically and dressed, her movements slow, deliberate. The Barrett was cleaned and racked in the armory, its weight off her back at last. But in some strange way, she missed it already. When she stepped out into the corridor, she nearly ran into Martinez. He stopped, cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. The man who had barked orders at her for months now seemed unsure of what to say. "You got a minute?" he asked. Maya nodded. He led her into a small, empty briefing room, shut the door. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said, "I was wrong about you." The words were simple, but they hit harder than she expected. Maya stayed silent, waiting. Martinez sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "When I told you to stick to the radio, when I said we'd handle the kinetics, I thought I was protecting the team. Turns out I was just underestimating you." He looked at her then, really looked, as though seeing her for the first time. "You didn't just save us out there," he said quietly. "You held the entire valley by yourself. If you hadn't been on that ridge, we'd be 24 names on a memorial wall right now." Maya shifted her weight, the words landing heavy. "I just did what needed to be done." Martinez shook his head. "No, you did more than that. You took an impossible situation and turned it. You gave us a chance to fight our way out." He hesitated, then added, "I owe you an apology. For every time I doubted you. For every time I laughed when you spoke up." She met his gaze then, her expression unreadable. "Just don't do it again," she said softly. For a second Martinez blinked, and then to her surprise he laughed. A short, almost disbelieving sound. "Fair," he said. They stood there a moment longer before he straightened and saluted her. Not casually, not joking, a crisp, formal salute. Maya returned it without hesitation. When he left, the room felt very quiet. She sat for a long time, staring at the map still pinned to the wall, the valley circled in red marker. She had turned that valley into something else last night, not just a battlefield but a lesson. And that thought stayed with her through the next days. Word spread fast through the base. By the time Maya walked into the mess hall, the conversations went quiet, heads turned. Some nodded. Some just stared. She ate quickly, keeping her head down, but she could feel their eyes on her. Not mocking this time. Not dismissive. Something closer to reverence, and maybe a little guilt. Later that night, unable to sleep, Maya walked out to the perimeter. The mountains were quiet now, the sky sharp and endless overhead. She crouched in the dust, picked up a small stone and turned it over in her fingers. She thought about her abuelo, how he had told her that the mountain doesn't need permission to stand. Maybe that was what she had done. Stood. Not for glory, not for recognition. Just because it needed to be done. Her breath misted in the cold air. She didn't know if she was a hero, whatever that word meant, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She had been exactly where she needed to be, exactly when she needed to be there. And maybe that was enough. When she finally returned to her rack, she slept for the first time in days, a deep, dreamless sleep that felt almost like mercy. But when morning came, the quiet didn't last. She was summoned to the colonel's office. When she entered, Colonel Harrison was waiting, his expression as sharp as ever. "Corporal," he said, gesturing to a chair, "sit." She did. For several seconds the colonel just studied her. Then he leaned forward. "You understand what you did out there was not just extraordinary, it was unprecedented. 31 confirmed kills at extreme range. No friendly casualties. That will be in every training manual from here to Quantico." Maya stayed silent, unsure what to say. Harrison's gaze softened slightly. "I'm putting you in for a commendation, likely the Silver Star, possibly higher." She blinked. "Sir, I wasn't." He held up a hand. "You weren't looking for medals, I know, that's why it matters." He sat back, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But I need you to understand something. What you did was also dangerous. You broke protocol, left your assigned post. There will be questions." Maya nodded once, understood. The colonel tilted his head. "Do you regret it?" Her answer came without hesitation. "No, sir." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Good," he said, "because neither do I." When she left his office, Maya felt something shift inside her, subtle but unmistakable. The doubt that had dogged her since boot camp was gone. She had proved herself not to them, but to herself. And that was something no one could take away. What happens when the soldier they ignored becomes the one they all look to? It started small. A nod in the hallway from a SEAL who had never even acknowledged her before. A tray of food silently slid across the table at the mess hall, the best seat in the room left open for her. A quiet "ma'am" from a private who looked barely 19. Maya didn't ask for any of it. But she noticed. The base had changed since that night. And so had she. When she stepped into the armory now, no one asked her why she needed the Barrett. No one smirked or joked about shooting satellites. They simply handed it to her, wordless, respectful. Because now everyone knew what happened when Corporal Maya Rodriguez set up on a ridge. They called her Guardian, not just as a call sign anymore, but like it was her name. Martinez found her one afternoon on the range. She was alone, prone in the dust, running her breathing drills, the rifle perfectly still across her shoulder. He didn't interrupt until she was finished with her string. "You ever miss?" he asked finally. Maya rolled onto her back, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Sure," she said, "but I don't miss twice." He grinned at that, the first unguarded grin she'd ever seen on his face. "You know," he said, crouching next to her, "since that night, Command has been talking about establishing permanent overwatch elements for missions in this sector. They want someone to write the manual, someone who's done it." Maya arched an eyebrow. "And you're here to ask?" Martinez shrugged. "I'm here to tell you that you're the only one who can." It was strange, hearing that from him, the same man who once told her to stick to the radio. She thought about it for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then we do it right." And they did. For weeks, she worked with Martinez and the other operators, walking them through her climb, her math, the way she had used the mountain's shape to stay hidden between shots. At first, some of them were skeptical, men who had been in firefights all over the world, who thought they had nothing left to learn. But when Maya spoke, they listened. Because they knew she had lived it. One night during a training exercise, she led a small team up the same ridge she had climbed that night. The climb was brutal even in daylight. Men slipped, cursed, nearly turned back. When they reached the top, breathless and scraped raw, Maya had them lie prone just as she had and look down at the valley. "This," she said quietly, "is what it looks like when you decide who lives and who dies. Don't ever forget that." The men were silent for a long time after that. Later, one of the younger SEALs approached her privately. "Ma'am," he said almost shyly, "that night I was the one who said we were already ghosts. I thought we were dead." Maya studied him for a moment, then put a hand on his shoulder. "You were," she said softly, And then we all decided not to be. He nodded, eyes wet, and walked away. Her nights were still restless sometimes. She'd wake up with the echo of the Barrett's recoil in her shoulder, the valley still spread out in her mind's eye. But the fear that had once stalked her dreams was gone. In its place was something quieter. Not pride exactly, but a kind of peace. When the commendation finally came through, Silver Star, just as the colonel predicted, she accepted it in silence. The ceremony was short, the applause polite but heartfelt. She didn't need the medal to know who she was now. That night she took the medal and pinned it inside the lid of her rifle case. Not to display, but to remember. Because for Maya, the true weight of that night wasn't in the recognition. It was in the knowledge that when the moment came, she hadn't hesitated. She had been invisible her entire career. Now invisibility was her strength. Guardian wasn't just a call sign. It was a choice. And with every new mission, every operator who sought her out for advice, every young Marine who asked her about Overwatch drills, that choice echoed. Not because of what she had done once, but because of what she continued to do every day after. There was a quiet power in that. And though she rarely smiled, there were moments, fleeting, private, when she felt something close to pride. Not for herself, but for the men who now trusted her without question. For the knowledge that if the valley ever turned into a cauldron again, she would be ready. Would she ever climb that ridge again? The thought crossed her mind as the helicopter skimmed low over the mountains, rotors chopping the thin air. Another mission, another valley, another team on the ground counting on her. Maya sat in the doorway, Barrett across her lap, her gloved hands steady despite the cold. The young operator across from her kept sneaking glances, not mocking, not doubtful, just curious. "Ma'am," he said finally, raising his voice over the noise of the rotors, "you really climbed 800 feet in the dark with that thing on your back." Maya didn't look up from checking her rifle. "I did," she said simply. He nodded once and didn't ask another question. When the bird touched down, Maya was the first to step off. This valley was different, wider, less claustrophobic, but the smell of dust and cordite was the same, the air charged with the same sense of waiting violence. She moved without hesitation, leading the small Overwatch team up a narrow draw. The climb was hard, but not impossible, not for her. Not anymore. She reached the top just as the sun dipped below the peaks, painting the rocks in blood-red light. From here, the valley stretched out like an open book. She could see the entire battle space, every possible line of fire, every angle the enemy might use. She deployed the bipod, settled into position. Below, the team was still maneuvering into place, their voices calm over the radio. Maya checked her scope, adjusted for windage, felt the mountain's breath on her cheek. She had done this 100 times now. The fear that had once sat coiled in her gut was gone. In its place was something steady. The first contact came minutes later, a burst of fire from the far tree line. The team below took cover, returned fire in short, disciplined bursts. Maya didn't rush. She waited. Watched. When the enemy machine gun revealed itself, her finger tightened on the trigger. Crack. The threat disappeared. The radio came alive. "Guardian, we see you up there, good shot." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The next few minutes were a symphony of control, each shot deliberate, each position shift calculated. The enemy never got close. When it was over, the valley fell silent again, as they all seemed to eventually. Maya lay there for a while, cheek still against the stock, watching the last light fade. Her team moved in to secure the area, their voices calm, confident. She breathed slowly, letting the quiet settle into her bones. This time there was no rush of adrenaline, no trembling hands. only the knowledge that she had done exactly what she was supposed to do. When she finally stood, the stars were coming out one by one. She slung the Barrett over her shoulder and looked out over the darkened valley. She thought about the first time she had stood like this, cold, terrified, half convinced she wouldn't make it down alive. She thought about the men she had saved that night, the ones who had stopped laughing when she entered a room. And she thought about the mountain, how her abuelo had said it doesn't need permission to stand. Neither did she. Back at the fob, Martinez met her as she came in. No salute this time, just a nod. "Good work, Guardian." She nodded back, her expression calm. There would be other missions, other ridges, other valleys. But she knew now that when the storm came, and it always came, she would be there. She didn't need to speak about it. She didn't need to explain herself. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.